Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another insightful session of the Risk Leaders Initiative. Today, we're honored to have with us a distinguished expert, Mr. Simon. He's expert in enterprise risk management, resilience, and strategic problem solving. So, I think based on my experience, leadership is a key factor in ensuring the success of any risk management framework. Resistance to change is always possible and it can happen, especially when people don't feel engaged in the process. For ERM to be truly effective, people must see the value it brings to their work and their organization. Simplicity and clarity are very important. Overcomplicating risk management can lead to disengagement. Changing mindset, in my opinion, is far more challenging than implementing a new policy or installing a new software. True transformation happens when people understand the purpose behind the change and actively participate in it. So, in a world that is increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and digital, the ability to anticipate, manage, and transform risks into opportunities has become a defining factor for successful organizations. Risk management is no longer as a compliance driver or just avoiding threats. It's about enhancing decision making, ensuring business continuity, and driving long term resilience and success. With over 35 years of experience in engineering, operational leadership, and enterprise risk management, Mr. Martins has played a pivotal role in developing and implementing risk strategies for large scale energy projects in South Africa and the Philippines. His expertise spans ERM, business continuity, environmental compliance, and strategic leadership, which makes him the perfect guide for this session. In today's session, we will explore the critical aspects of enterprise risk management and why it is important for modern organizations, how resilience is built proactively instead of reactively, the realities of business continuity planning, which bridge the preparation with execution, and finally, strategic problem solving techniques for dealing with emerging risks and uncertainties. Mr. Martins, your extensive experience in risk leadership, and your ability to apply these principles across industries makes this session an invaluable opportunity for all of us here today. We deeply appreciate your willingness to share your insights and help us enhance our understanding of risk management in this scary VUCA world. On behalf of myself and the Risk Leaders Initiative and the whole wide community of risk management, we extend our warmest welcome to you for being with us today. So, as you know, and you've been with us in previous sessions, the members always love to give a welcoming message in the beginning. So, after that, the floor is yours. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Can hear you?
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Martin. My name is Taif, a fresh graduate of Imam Hamad bin Saud University. On behalf of myself and all the members of the Leaders Initiative, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. It's an honor to have you with us today to share your expertise and insights in enterprise risk management, a topic that is so critical for organization thriving to build strength, ensure business continuity, and navigate the complexities of today's ever-changing world. As professionals and leaders committed to enhancing risk leadership, we understand that enterprise risk management is not only about reducing threats, but also about creating opportunities and improving decision making and ensuring long-term success. Your experience in this field make this session very valuable to us, and we deeply appreciate your willingness to contribute this initiative. Once again, thank you for being with us today. We really look forward to an interesting and useful session with you. The floor is now yours, Mr. Martin.
Thank you so much, Taif. Thank you, Fayad. Thank you for the kind words, the warm welcome. It is an absolute privilege to be a small part of this wonderful and noble initiative. I've interacted with Fayad over a few weeks, and this is impressive. I wish you well, and Taif, thank you for the warm welcome. So yeah, the topic for today is enterprise risk management and strengthening resilience, business continuity, and strategic problem solving. So the agenda you've seen, I'm not going to read through that again. But as Fayad said, we live in a VUCA world. And enterprise risk management is a framework to help us deal more effectively with the uncertainty. And I will share with you information through my lens and my experience. And you'll see later on how I make also a comment to your fraternity about their experience and how it is, despite different views, one's own experience is something that nobody can take away from you. So just briefly, as Fayad said, on the left-hand side, I worked at this power plant in South Africa, 6 by 600 megawatt units, in other words, 3,600 megawatts, coal-fired power plant. In South Africa, the coal mine is right next to the power plant. The power plants are built right next to the coal fields. So I worked there for 10 years, first in engineering and then 12 more years in risk management before I moved on, still in South Africa and in the same state-owned company that does the power generation. I also had the opportunity at this power plant to establish enterprise risk management as it did not exist before. And this was before we had the ISO standards. Then I had much later on the opportunity to be in the Philippines for 5 years at this plant, much smaller, but still the biggest coal-fired power plant in the Philippines. The coal in this case is shipped from Indonesia and it comes into the jetty that you can see there at the backside with ship unloaders. Over there, when I started there was just about nothing. It was ground and a little bit of construction. And I was a risk and assurance manager, so we had to put in place all processes, all systems, and recruit all the people. And on the day that my contract was over, the EAF, sorry for those who may not know power plants all that well, but the EAF was at 97%. And that is absolutely brilliant performance. Okay, so understanding enterprise risk management. For effective enterprise risk management, the vocabulary, principles, framework, processes, those are all important. And there are many versions of this. If you are regularly on LinkedIn, you can see all the different views. What is really important for this fraternity is to build your own comprehensive understanding of ERM and effectively integrating all of the various aspects of that. Now, as risk professionals, we operate in a real world with its uncertainties and its risks. And as Fayadh said at the beginning, at the moment it is absolutely VUCAT. And we then need to translate that into an abstract representation to understand it better and to deal with it effectively in terms of the decision making, in terms of achieving objectives. We do this through our ERM framework. We use words and graphics to describe ERM and its concepts. However, words, and we know this, words can never accurately describe a real life situation. Just ask a group of 5 people that saw the same thing happening and you'll get 5 different versions. So words do not accurately describe the real world. And even if you could, words differ from person to person because of our knowledge, our experience, our biases, our culture, etc. So to enable a better understanding, we need to get on common ground with some of the vocabulary. And I'm going to share just a few essentials with you and also demonstrate the way that I go about understanding it. For tonight, we create an understanding, not necessarily agreement. You may have different views, but some level of understanding about the concepts. In my LinkedIn profile, you will find a position paper that shares more information on the vocabulary and specifically how I use it in my consulting business. So we'll start with the understanding of risk, and I want to highlight 2 aspects of this. And the first is the definition, and then secondly, the way that it is typically expressed. Now, the definition, and I'm to a large extent aligned with ISO 31000, but I go further and deeper in what I do, and you'll see it as we progress. But the definition is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. And I'll come back and unpack this definition just now. But when we ask people about risk, they describe it in a number of ways. So it's expressed in terms of potential uncertain future events. It could be described as causes or sources of these events. The consequences of these events in terms of how they affect objectives and their likelihood. Now, the word likelihood in this case, and we'll come to it a bit later on, can apply to all of the things that I've listed above. So the first one, the risk definition, is the principle, and the second one is the practical application. In my work, I make use of the bow tie method to explain the risk concepts. It's a nice and easy way to show somebody the various concepts in a single view. I will use the bow tie to unfold some of the concepts throughout this presentation. So the the risk expression elements in terms of the bow tie helps to put it across more effectively. It's a visual way. It helps organizations understand and manage, communicate risks in a structured way. And the elements, main elements, are the risks, which are potential events. Take note, potential events, or changes in circumstances, or potential with potential causes for those risks, And you will know that you can have multiple causes for the same risk. This is the proactive or the preventive side of risk management. But for each risk, there are also a number of potential causes, and that is the reactive side. Upcoming, I have a very short video that I've made that shows you the bow tie in a bit more detail. So where here I have only the three elements. In the bow tie, you will see it goes further on both sides. But for the time that we have tonight, we'll focus on these three elements only. All right, thank you. So you can see that there's much more than just the three elements, but for tonight we'll focus on those three. So we move on from risk to the definition of risk management. Now, risk management, the way that I define it, is the coordinated activities to direct and control the causes and consequences of uncertainties and potential events, and then in brackets, that may have an effect on the achievement of objectives. Now, risk management could, if you look at what the definition of risk is, the effect of uncertainty on objectives, also be described as the management of the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Think for a moment, how would you manage uncertainty so that you still achieve your objectives? If you were to go to a meeting, an interview at a certain time in a trial, how would your actions be different if you drive yourself versus taking public transport? So how would you manage the effect of uncertainty on objectives, even if the objective is as simple as getting to a certain place on time? So the definition of risk, we've seen what that is. Now, it is important to remember this or any definition if you use a different definition, but you need to know that from heart. The fundamental understanding of any definition is critical. So let's unpack risk, this risk definition, to understand it. And this is what I said earlier. Have a look at the way that I go about doing this and getting to understand this. Now, if you look at that definition, apart from the word risk, there are three very prominent words in this definition, and I'm sure you can identify them. So let's move on to the first one. It is the word effect. The definition of the word effect, as per ISO, and which I agree with, is a deviation from the expected. The expectation is a well-considered, documented expectation. This basic expectation is that you will achieve objectives and performance targets. The effect can be positive or negative. Taif made a comment in her part at the beginning about opportunities. So the positive side is the opportunities. So that's the word effect. Let's move on to the next one. That is uncertainty. Uncertainty is a deficiency of information related to understanding or knowledge. Uncertainty is a state where more than one possibility exists. And uncertainty is the fundamental source of risk. And this uncertainty can affect objectives. Now, going into a bit more practical detail, uncertainty can relate to a number of things. We can have uncertainty related to the context or business environment that one operates in. There can be uncertainty related to events, incidents, occurrences, or circumstances. Also to the causes or sources of an event. And I use the word causes and sources. We can't go into all the detail now, but there is a slight difference. Also, the combination and sequence of causes. Those of you that have been in the industry for a while know that most events don't depend on a single cause materializing. It's usually a combination of causes. Then the consequences of the event, that can be uncertain, and also the same event does not always have the same consequences. Just take a vehicle crash. The consequences are not always the same. So there's uncertainty about which ones of the possible consequences, uncertainty about the likelihood, as well as the severity of the consequences. Also about the adequacy of controls for causes and consequences, and the effectiveness of controls, causes and consequences. I'm sure you have an understanding of the difference between adequacy and effectiveness. And then moving on to the last of the three words in the definition, that's objectives. Objectives are results to be achieved. Objectives are also expressed in terms of performance indicators with targets, and it is necessary to take risk to achieve objectives. There's a balance. Some people and resources claim that risk needs to be eliminated. In real life, that's not possible. You can hardly ever eliminate risk. Often you need to take more risk to achieve objectives, especially around making use of the opportunities. So it's a balance. It's about well-considered risk in order to achieve certain objectives. I make use of a business concepts triangle, which I use in my consulting work. It shows the process as we apply it and how the concepts relate to each other. And now that we're talking about objectives, that's the part in the red block, and you'll see it has one leg in the strategic side and one leg in the operational side. The really important part is below the red block, because it's the performance measures and especially the processes and systems that enable the objectives to be achieved that is important. I apply 10 principles in my ERM framework. Again, in the position paper, in my LinkedIn profile, there is more information. The first principle is value creation and value protection. We don't do risk management for the sake of risk management. We do it for creating value and protecting value. It is integrated. It's integrated in terms of the process, the concepts in the process, and not taking just one step, one principle, and highlighting that as the silver bullet, but an integrated manner in which we deal with it. It is structured and comprehensive. Then it can be customized, and usually is customized depending on the requirements of the business or the circumstances. Inclusion of people, collaboration with people, and communication with people, very important. Never do a risk assessment on one's own in a corner office. The results of that is not good. The process is dynamic. We live in a dynamic world, and therefore the process has to fit in with that. We do the interventions with the best available information at the time. Then cultural entrenchment, very important. It has to become the way we do things. Continual improvement is critical. We need to learn from the things we do well and why did they work, and the things that didn't go well and why didn't it work. And lastly, it is proactive and preventive. Now, principles 2 up to 9 is directly the same as ISO. However, I've added, for my purposes, number 1 and number 10. They're both addressed in ISO, but not as principles. Then moving on to the process, we start with a background. We need to understand the reason for the risk management activity that we're busy with. We need to understand the organization and its context, the goals, objectives, and context. And for that, again, I use the concepts triangle. It shows how the processes apply to each other and how that adds up from the top towards the bottom. We also need to understand the current performance of the organization. That will tell us to what extent the objectives are being achieved and how critical our ERM process is in helping to achieve that. We need to understand the decision-making process of an organization, and we found that with a lot of organizations, when you ask the question, what is your process? There are quite a few blank stares. So that is important, is what is the process and how do they go about making decisions. Then the development of risk management decision-making criteria. It is often, you see this in risk matrices. We're not going to go into that tonight in terms of the analysis and how valid that is and how you go about doing that. But you need decision-making criteria. We're going to use that later on in the upcoming step. Then we need to define the scope and context and criteria for the very specific risk management activity. ERM is extremely useful in a multiple of circumstances. Sometimes in a straightforward risk assessment, sometimes in assessing matters for insurance purposes. The principles and process is very, very useful. So these first 6 steps is really about preparation and understanding. It's even before we get to the analysis. In this process that I follow, steps 2 to 5, I go into a lot more detail than what is covered in ISO. And I have a tool that I use to go into this level of detail. And even before identifying risks, I already have an understanding of how many of the objectives are dependent on certain processes, how critical is that process, does it apply to only one objective or multiple objectives, the same with the controls. And that is what I get out of just this first part. Step 7 is to identify the uncertainties and the risks, then to do the analysis. As I said, we will not touch on the types of analysis tonight. And then we do the risk evaluation where we make decisions. Now you will know that these 3 steps together constitute a risk assessment. We then go on, having made decisions, to the risk treatment, both in terms of just the planning, but also the actual execution. Then the monitoring and review thereof, and lastly, reporting. So that's a quick run through the essentials. Let me recap in one slide just a few things about enterprise risk management. So it is a process to achieve an outcome. It is not about opinions. It is not just about pattern recognition from what historically happened. It is much more than that. As risk professionals, you will often run into senior executives having opinions about the risks and the reasons for that. Be careful for that. The ultimate outcome is the achievement of objectives and performance targets. That's why we do risk management. Yes, decision-making is important, but we don't do it for decision-making. Decision-making is another part of the process. Ultimately, it's about achieving our objectives. It's not a tick box exercise. It's not about demonstrating our proficiency with risk management or any one of the principles of risk management. It's more than that. Process steps need to be followed, keeping in mind the principles to ensure effective outcomes. The process can be customized depending on the requirements of the organization or the situation. However, we need to adhere to the principles when doing the customization. Then lastly, risk management is a cognitive process where the value from the interaction during the interventions is a significant part of the total value. Sometimes the value of the discussion, the value of the multiple perspectives, the value of getting executives with views as diverse as they come, aligned or more aligned. Sometimes the value is in there, and the value is more than the documented outcome. Not that the documented outcome is unimportant. Obviously, we need to follow the full process. We can use tools, including AI, for the steps, but be careful of automating the full process. You lose the cognitive part. You use the human interaction. You lose the part where a senior risk person sits in a meeting, listens to a conversation, identifies things, and realizes we need to do something here. That is a risk. We need to go out of this meeting and deal with it. Sometimes those discussions happen in the hallways. And as risk professionals, we need to be able to identify those cues and follow the process. All right, so moving on to resilience. The definition of resilience. Resilience is the ability of an organization to absorb change and adapt in a changing environment. And why? To enable it to keep delivering its objectives. A changing environment generally relates to the external environment. Things like geopolitical risks, supply chain risks, AI. However, it can also relate to the internal environment. And one of the most severe internal changes I've seen is a change in a CEO. And the massive impact that has on a business potentially. So if we look at the bow tie, one of the ERM principles is proactive and preventive. We've seen that earlier. Resilience is the proactive part and the preventive part of ERM, and that is here on the left-hand side. I think, it's not the previous one, but in one of the previous, one of these sessions, there was a reference to the term resilience. Nice term. It gets the message across. Now, resilience. How are we proactive? What do we do to be proactive? We identify firstly risks and uncertainties, and we do it in 3 steps. Imagine what can happen. Imagine what circumstances may change. Those are 2 different, essentially, concepts, but we need to start with those. And then we find many risks and uncertainties were reality in the past and can materialize again, and we need to include them in our identification. Now, these three little arrows and the sequence that they're in is important. The first two you can still switch around, doesn't matter, but you need to do the imagination first. You need to think about what can go wrong and what circumstances can change first. And then you can go to the past, to the actual past of the organization and what has happened. If you start in the past, believe you me, you'll be stuck in the past. It's very difficult to go back to imagining when you've looked at the past. And a skilled risk facilitator will know this and will deal with this in the right way. Risk identification is the start of the risk assessment process, as we saw in the process earlier. Now, being proactive, the awareness of early signs of causes materializing is key in resilience. We want to identify a crack, whether it's a physical crack in the road, in the building, in our business, in machinery. We want to identify the crack when it's small, not when it has opened up. Addressing causes is better than addressing events. Don't let it get to the event. But to achieve that, we need to have awareness. Awareness or consciousness is required for the effective identification and activation of planned preventive activities. Then we need to monitor that the controls that we've established work as designed and intervene with modified controls based on the actual situation. And we'll see later on coming up as well, the actual situation is usually a bit different to what we had imagined. These items are before the event. They are pre the event. And if we're successful, they prevent the event. And there are then no consequences. That is the importance of resilience and being proactive right up front. Now, resilience, there's a principle related to resilience and there's a process. Here we kind of talk about both of them, but the process part is early in the process on the proactive side. The principle also applies to BCM and other management aspects. It applies to business continuity as well. Now, the importance of being resilient, Einstein said, intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them. Let's prevent them. It's right here with resilience. Moving on to business continuity. The definition here is it is the capability of the organization to continue the delivery of products and services following a risk event materializing. I know business continuity gets used in different contexts. It sometimes gets mixed up with sustainability, but business continuity in terms of ERM is about continuing to deliver products and services, and we'll get into a bit more detail around that now. But it is about the back end of our bow tie, dealing with the consequences. So business continuity, there are two parts, preparation and reality. Business continuity management is focused on three key aspects, and again, the order of priority here is key. The first one is to avoid the consequence, or at least some of the consequences. even if you have a vehicle crash where you damage the vehicle, let's at least not have injuries. So prevent some of the consequences. So avoiding consequences, first option. It is extremely difficult to avoid all consequences. The next one is minimizing the extent of the consequences. So even if you have injuries, let it be minor instead of fatalities. And the last one is recovering swiftly from a risk event and its consequences. For example, that you have spare equipment so that if you have equipment breakdown, you can just replace it and you don't have to wait for months. The key to BCM is to focus on those risks and uncertainties affecting your strategic objectives or the mission critical objectives. The triangle that I showed earlier, right at the top, is the mission. The mission says, what is it that we're doing? And the strategic objectives or the mission critical objectives are the ones that we need to continue fulfilling, and we need to focus on the risks related to them. So if we look at the preparation side of business continuity, preparation involves taking each risk and uncertainty identified and listing all the possible consequences of that risk if it materializes. For each consequence, determine how we can eliminate it, minimize it, and recover from it swiftly. Those are the same three categories I've mentioned earlier. Preparation involves documenting our planned responses, establishing practical mechanisms like buying spare equipment. Then the BCM documents and mechanisms must be communicated to the organization up front, not when things go wrong. Preparation also involves the practical exercising of our mechanisms, doing drills and making sure things work as we plan. Then the reality. One of the roles of ERM is to prevent the reality of events. We do that mainly through resilience. The reality to prevent events and circumstances that can affect our objectives. However, real life happens. Things happen. The first priority is the health and safety of people. Thereafter, it is to sustain the products and services despite the risk that materialized. And the resilience principle applies here in BCM, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the actual reality is usually different to the reality that we imagined. Things don't always happen like we think they do. However, the principles in dealing with the actual reality are usually very much similar to the ones that we prepared for. Having an understanding of the intent of our responses, we can adapt the response easier. Having given consideration and used our cognitive processes we went through, enables better adaptation to unexpected situations. Experience is crucial when reality happens. Staying calm is crucial. Effective communication and dedicated people for communication is important, and a review of the event afterwards to learn from that and achieve continual improvement important. Coming to the fourth agenda item, problem solving. Firstly, just the definition of a problem. It's a situation with a deviation from the expected. Now, you've seen those words before, deviation from the expected. If we look at a problem graphically, you have a timeline with the past on the left-hand side, the present on the right-hand side, performance on the vertical axis, a green target line, which is the expected. We expect it to achieve at the target level. The blue line is the actual performance, which initially is on target or meeting expectations, and then there's a change. And when we do problem solving, we always look for that change, the timing and the circumstances around the change. But when there's a change, the actual now deviates from the target and we have a deviation. So a deviation from the expected. A problem is a visible effect of a cause that resides somewhere in the past. And it's very important that we understand the difference between a risk and a problem, because the processes to deal with them are different. And essentially, a risk is a possible or uncertain future event, whereas a problem is an actual situation that's materialized. There's no uncertainty. It has happened. A risk is a possible deviation in the future that we need to avoid. A problem is an actual deviation in the past or present that we need to investigate. And if we go to our bow tie, then it is the center part. Now, typically, when you have a risk materializing, you need to deal with the consequences first in terms of business continuity, and then come back and do the problem solving. However, if you're in a 24/7 business, a utility that provides electricity or water, in a fintech company, banks, internet provider, then problem solving, believe you me, starts the moment you start dealing with the consequences. You can't wait. You'll have everybody at your front door if you wait longer. For problems, we need to analyze the deviations. We need to analyze them, whether they originated from events or from circumstances or from a deviation in performance. It may not be that things have fallen apart and things have failed catastrophically, but we didn't meet our performance targets. Analysis of deviations allow for understanding why it occurred and correcting into the future. Then we need to close the loop. If the problem is internal to the business, we can do root cause analysis. If the problem is external, we need to ask whether there is something that we could or should have done not to be affected. Did we identify this possibility? If not, why not? If we did, but it still affected us, why did we allow it to affect us? And we need to close the loop with our risk management system, and we need to ask the question, did we foresee this? What was the risk control effectiveness that we identified? Why, despite perhaps having a good risk control effectiveness, did this still happen? And the problem-solving process is again a process that produces an outcome, not based on perception or opinion. This process is more prone to influence by people to jump to conclusions, to say it was this or that. Now, the techniques that I prefer to use for the problem solving are the fault tree analysis in combination with the 5 why technique. The fault tree analysis allows you to identify the direct cause, singular, the contributory causes, there could be multiple, root cause, singular, and the 5 why technique allows us to arrive at the root cause. I use the Kepner-Trigot process for very complex technical risks. Okay, so let's summarize and get to the practical side. ERM is a framework, an abstract representation of reality. Vocabulary and understanding is important. The purpose of ERM is to increase the likelihood of achieving objectives. It must focus on objectives. We can't do ERM without focusing on objectives. It incorporates resilience and business continuity. It starts with understanding, but understanding doesn't change anything. We need to move on to taking action. Nothing changes until you've taken action. Strategic problem solving enables increased confidence in future achievement of our objectives. And my view is ERM adds value and protects value. Believe it, I've seen it. This process works. Then lastly, just a few practical things for this group particularly, recent graduates and young professionals. Some practical pointers. Ensure that you build your own understanding of ERM. Ensure you have a comprehensive understanding of the integrated version of ERM. You may want to niche down to qualitative analysis or culture or AI or something else. But without the understanding of the integrated part, one will always be at a lack. There is so much guidance out there, yet you have to make it your own. ERM, make it your own. We have access to an overwhelming amount of information. It is not about knowledge anymore. It is about connecting the dots with the information and add practical value. Go out and do it. You cannot perfect a framework in your head or even on paper. You have to do it. You have to go out and do it. You will only learn when you do it and either succeed or make mistakes, but you'll learn from both. Sometimes, well, often more from making mistakes than from succeeding. Stephen Bartlett would say, outfail everyone else, that this is the key to progress. The best learning, in my view, is through risk assessment facilitation. It's a tough world. You will experience the value and difficulties of multiple perspectives, keeping in mind the process that you need to facilitate and all of the comments that are coming in, all the contradictory information that you need to somehow incorporate and get the process to produce the right outcome. I want to encourage you to journal daily. This is for your work and for your personal life, but document what worked, what didn't work, and your understanding of why it worked and why it didn't work. This is the basis for making sense of ERM and developing your framework, principles, and processes. And then your experience is your own. Nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can invalidate it. Nobody can say it doesn't work like that. It's your experience. Now, this journaling and experience is the basis for you for your own online writing. This is key into the future, or a podcast, or advice for somebody that's a few steps behind you. You might think it's too early for that. Believe you me, there are people just behind you that will value your perspective. It may even serve as a basis for your own book in future. Have those aspirations. Test processes, tools, and techniques. When you gain the right experience, opportunities will come looking for you. Do what you do very well. I've had the privilege of experiencing this where you get the phone calls to say, please come to the Philippines, come and help. This journey that you're on as a recent graduate and a young professional is exciting. Make the best of it. Many of you will start out as risk leaders, this group, but diligent and disciplined following of this journey may mean that you end up as leaders, unrelated to this discipline, or leaders of companies or your country. Find a mentor that can guide you and push you to new heights. And my last slide, as you start, Rumi said, as you start to walk on the way appears. It's like walking in the dark or driving in the dark at night with your car lights on. You can't see the destination 100 kilometers. You can see the 100, 200 meters ahead of you. Just start driving. The road will come. I wish all of you well on your journeys. It's an exciting journey, and with the guidance of people like Dr. Fayadh, you are sure to succeed. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martins. It's a very interesting session. Thank you very much. Let's see if there are questions. And I have some questions too, but let's see if they have questions. So let me ask Mr. Martins, as young leaders in this field or that they are in the beginning of their journey, what are the set of skills that they need to develop besides the knowledge and understanding about risk?
My view is that the management 101 to me is listening to what people are saying. Don't judge before you've listened somebody through. Don't come up with the answer. So it's listening skills. It is being very organized and very systematic in terms of following the process and understanding the intent of the steps of the process. And can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Understanding the steps of the process, and then the facilitation skills. To be able to take the process, make people understand the process, converge the different views into an outcome where there's buy-in from everyone that is present. However, it sometimes also comes with the not so nice situations. My view is especially a chief risk officer is there to tell people what they need to hear, not what they like to hear. And you need to be able to get that message across in a way where it is accepted, where you don't, get told no. Thank you. We'll make the decisions. You can leave the room.
Yeah.
So Fayadh, those are some of the things that I can think of now.
They're very helpful. Thank you very much. So let's see if there are questions, and I have one more question. So my other question, Mr. Martins, in risk management, sometimes we get buy-in, especially when we do awareness sessions, people feel engaged and agree with us. But when we turn those risks to owners, sometimes it gets very ugly, owning risks sometimes it's what's causing resistance. So based on your experience, how have you overcome this ownership? How did you deal with ownership aspects of risk? Because it's very critical. You can't, because you're not doing the job, they're doing the job, so they have to own it and feel it in order, to do this stuff. So how did you deal with this, especially when dealing with such large projects in different environments?
All right. So I think the first thing is that a risk owner must be somebody, and there's two things, that is responsible for that matter and accountable. That has the authority to deal with that matter. So it's not as if you then give them something that they're not responsible for. It is the matter that they're appointed for to help the business achieve the objectives. Now, when I said earlier that triangle with the business concepts and how things escalate or come down from the mission right down to the bottom, it also in at that point already is about who's responsible for the objective, who's responsible for the processes just below that objective to enable the achievement of that objective. You need to look at how specific individuals and how many processes they are allocated and whether they can deal with it. But the thing is to, at that point, right at the beginning, do those allocations, create the understanding and the buy-in that you're responsible for this and you're the person authorized to deal with this. We are helping you to achieve your performance targets. And to create context in the mind of a risk owner on why they need to deal with that risk. And, I can see you've had the experience. It is not always easy.
It's not easy at all. Yeah, thank you very much for clearing that. So, one more question in my mind. So, for business continuity department or functions, I would say, should it be under the toolbox of risk management functions? So, should it be there when I need it, or it should be, a separate toolbox from risk functions?
My experience is that it works better if it's part of the risk function, that you have all of the elements in one place, and that you can integrate it more effectively. That is how we've dealt with it in all of the businesses that I've been. Even when we had the training initially with ISO, that is how it was explained to us. My experience, it works well. I do see, that things have changed and that you now have things separated, risk and resilience and business continuity. We kept it all together. You may have at a level below the chief risk officer, that split up, but that have one person to deal with all of those.
Thank
One
you
function.
very much. Thank you very much. So I think it's a clear for me. You answered my questions very clearly. So let's see if there are no questions. I think there are no more questions. The presentation was amazing and clear. If you have a closing statement before we finish, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Fayadh. So essentially, my message is understand the big picture. Understand how ERM is integrated in terms of the ERM process, how it is integrated in the business. This is how ERM strengthens resilience, business continuity, and problem solving, and all of the other ERM related concepts that I covered in the principles and the process. The understanding is key to connecting the dots, and our role is to connect the dots, to make the picture clear, to go from that real world picture where an executive say, aha, I understand, I'll give you the support.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Mr. Martin.
Thank you
It's
for the
been a pleasure to
opportunity,
have you.
Fayadh. It,
Yeah,
it
and
it's a privilege to be in the same
thank you.
company as yourself and everyone in this group.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is ours, and we look forward to having you in future sessions.
No problem. I will
Th-
support you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All of the best.